Hello, this is Sondra Oster, Baras, bringing you a few words of Bible from the heart of Biblical Israel. This week's Torah portion is Ha'azinu. It is 32nd chapter of Deuteronomy. We are nearing the end of the book, and we have the Song of Moses. It is all a poem, and Moses, in a very poetic way, is recapping history and is giving prophecy with regard to what will happen as they go forward into the land of Israel. In many ways, it repeats the ideas that Moses has set forth previously in prose, but here we have it in poetry. I want to just focus on two or three verses that I think convey a very, very important message to all of us. It begins in verse 7, and we hear Moses says as follows: "Remember the days of old. Understand the years of the generations. Ask your father, and he will tell you, your elders, and they will explain it to you." So, first of all, we have this very basic statement that talks about the importance of history. As a human being in any given generation, it is very important that we know what happened before us. And it doesn't say remember what happened when you were a child. It says remember the days of old. Now, you can't remember anything that you haven't experienced. So basically what this is saying is that even if we're talking about something that occurred centuries ago or generations ago, and you haven't personally experienced, you need to be part of the tradition that has passed down these stories, what has happened, these traditions. You have to be part of that story so that you can remember it. And you're remembering it as if it happened to you. That is how well ingrained the history, the ancient stories need to be within you. And talking about asking your father, asking your elders, it also emphasizes the fact that this is not about going to the library and taking out a history book. It is that these words of wisdom, this history, needs to be transmitted from generation to generation so that there's this unbroken line. And then in verse 8, basically it gives the first example of what it is that the nation of Israel is supposed to remember or know from its history. And here it says, when the Most High divided the nations into territories, when he separated the sons of man, he set the boundaries of the nations based on the number of the children of Israel. Now, what is this talking about? So the key here is on these few words, when he separated the sons of man. And that takes us back, of course, to the story of Tower of Babel. At a time when there was only one nation, there was just one people, and they gathered together to build a tower to challenge God, essentially. And at that point, God understood the danger in unity for a bad cause. He mixed up their languages so that they could no longer communicate with each other. And from that, we have all the nations. Traditionally, we talk about 70 nations. There were 70 languages. At that point, the children of man, until that point had been one family, ends up being divided into many nations. So God is saying, going back to that time, when he divided humanity into nations, at the same time, he determined which piece of land on this earth each nation would receive. How did he go about making that decision? He first thought about the nation of Israel. How much land will they need? Set that aside, and then after that determined the boundaries of the lands of the other nations. I think embedded in here are two very, very important principles. First of all, if we go specifically to what we hear in verse 8, there's so many nations today that question, does the land of Israel belong to the Jewish people? Who said, and people like us go and say, well, God gave us the land, and they'll say, oh, big deal. Like, that's not relevant anymore. The Bible is an ancient document. It's totally irrelevant. So aside from the fact of our faith that the Bible is the Word of God, okay, the Bible itself is an ancient document. And what these verses are telling us is that go back to the traditions, the old truths that have been passed down from father to son. And those truths will tell you who this land belongs to. Because going all the way back to when God first divided the humanity into nations and established different territories for different nations, it was all the way then. In fact, the first nation that got its territory was the nation of Israel. Even before the nation of Israel was born, already there was land set aside for that nation of Israel. So we see here that this establishment of the land of Israel as a home for the Jewish people began before there even was a Jewish people. And it is that tradition that is passed down for generations from creation, essentially, that is something we must preserve. But I think there's also a broader message here. History is important. So many people today, when you discuss any issue, whether it's Israel or any issue at all, God forbid you should start talking about history. Because people look at the here and now and they'll say, oh, this is mine. It belongs to me. Or I have a right to this or that. Why? Because that is the situation as it is perceived right now. But in order to get a really accurate picture of what is right and wrong and what really belongs to somebody, you must take the historical perspective. And if you don't have the historical perspective, then there is a huge gap in your truth. And this is what these scriptures are telling us. History matters. You need to, there was a famous saying, if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it. And that there's no question that is true. And today, unfortunately, so few people learn history. History is very important so that we learn the lessons of history and that we don't continue to make the same mistakes. But history is also important so that we understand what happened and what should happen and what was already ordained a long time ago. Do not turn our backs on that. We must remember these things, and we must realize that what happened before we were born, what is our background, what is our history, is relevant and it makes a difference as to who we are and how we need to move forward. Have a wonderful weekend. Shabbat Shalom.
I hope you enjoyed that film. And we have lots more film content and emails and articles that I'm sure you will enjoy as well. Check out our website at CFOIC.com and subscribe to our newsletter. You can do that right from the homepage. I know you will really enjoy the content that will land in your inbox on a regular basis. Hope to see you soon.